Good morning. Welcome to another edition of the CannaList Conversations. We are joined today by Michael Schwamm. He is the corporate partner at Duane Morris, with one area of focus being cannabis. Michael, welcome.
My pleasure to be here, Mike.
So, Michael, you're in New York, right?
That is correct.
And there's some stuff going on there. What's up?
Yeah, we have a developing cannabis market, a developing legal cannabis market in New York. But we've always had, from my early days, walking around the city, we've always had a cannabis market. It just hasn't been legal. But we have made some progress.
Legacy, right?
It's all been legacy. It's a very strong legacy market. The legacy market is actually, exploding in New York these days. You can't walk down the street now without getting, a whiff of weed, and there are legacy dispensaries popping up, completely illegal, and veiled threats from the OCM, our Office of Cannabis Management, that if people are starting to do it illegally now, it's going to be more difficult for them to get a legitimate legal license, versus the folks who've been doing it for a long time. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But yes, I mean, we've made some, I would call it, significant progress in the last couple of months. They have, put out regs or proposed regs for both they put out proposed regs for conditional cultivation license. They've now granted 88 licenses to those folks who have existing hemp licenses in New York. I think there are a total of 200 of them. And if you've been growing hemp for CBD with a relatively streamlined application, you can get a conditional hemp license that's good for, I believe, 2 years from the date of grant. And they have also now proposed, although we don't see any regs yet, nor is the portal open, they're going to grant licenses to probably up to 200 retail locations that are going to go to those folks who are, quote, justice involved, meaning that they or an immediate family member has a marijuana conviction on their record.
And one of the things that we routinely see is just the expectation, like this legislation gets passed, people think the market's going to open tomorrow, and then it takes several years to sort through this. Thoughts?
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I think that the press has done a little bit of a disservice saying, we're going to have a full cannabis market in New York by Q3 of this year. I mean, it moves slower than you expect. There will be supply chain issues. I mean, yes, they're getting some limited supply in the works, but we have no manufacturing or processing licenses yet. We have no distribution licenses yet, and so you're gonna have to figure out how to get the product from the from the seed to the sale, so to speak. And so it's going to take a while. I wouldn't expect we're going to see significant sales until next year, frankly. And it's like most states, I'm sure there will be adjustments on the regulatory front once they see how all this plays out.
And I know that New York's put a priority on the restorative justice programs. We have historically seen that these haven't been either managed well or have been taken advantage. What is New York doing to make sure that this program works?
Well, I mean, first off, I think they have been very thoughtful, and one of the reasons I think the regs have been slow to come out is they're looking around and talking to people to see what was been done right and what's been done wrong, right? While it's not a mandate, the stated goal in the legislation was at least 50% of all licenses will be granted to those folks who have been impacted by the war on drugs. Certainly the way to approaching retail with the first 200 having to have, right, you have to have been a New York resident, you have to have operated, own 10% of a business that has operated profitably for, I think, 2 out of the last 4 years, and have a marijuana related conviction, shows their intent to make sure that those folks, get priority. The challenge is always making sure that, the folks who get a license at whatever license category, are able to stand up a business and run it, and don't, get a license and then either get taken advantage of by predatory investors, or get a license, put hard-earned money into it, and because they don't have the skill to build out a cannabis business, are unsuccessful, and they've lost, whatever sort of safety net they have in terms of savings. And that's sort of always my concern on the social equity side. If you're granting it to those who truly, this business can be a life-altering event in terms of, of financial stability, generational wealth, that they have the skills necessary, to operate a business and put together the right team to help them succeed.
And they hope to do that by, picking people that have been in business, and is that the screening process?
Well, I mean, I think for the retail, having been involved as an owner and the business has been profitable, I think is certainly one step. The goal to stand up this $200 million, fund to provide, low interest loans to social equity applicants is another aspect of it, so that they can have, low interest, capital in which to build out their business. I mean, it's, depending upon where you want to build, assuming you're going to focus on retail, which may be retail and delivery, probably the two, least capital intensive. But from everybody I've spoken to, right, if you're trying to build a dispensary, to attract the kind of clientele you're probably going to want to attract, it's $1.5 million to $2 million, required investment. I mean, yes, I've heard people you could do it for 500,000, but I think
the reality is, it's $1 million, but it's going to be a while before you see profitability, right? Because as they work through the legislation, as they work through the taxation, as a later entrant into the cannabis space, is New York able to learn from the mistakes of California, the benefits of Colorado? Can they take advantage of those states and learn from them?
We certainly hope so. It's always a challenge. I think one of the real drivers for getting, this through any legislature is the potential tax revenue. So, we will have, high tax rates, maybe not as high as California. New York is going to base the tax rate on the THC content, which I think is a relatively novel concept. Although what I discovered is alcohol is actually taxed that way. It's just not taxed that way at the retail level. It's go through wholesale channels. I gather that the tax that the wholesaler pays is a function of how much alcohol is in what they're selling. So the tax rates are going to be there, which means you're going to have a legacy market. And the question always has been, and I don't know that any state has successfully, any large state has successfully figured out how to, solve that dilemma, right? Because with a high tax rate, with expensive leases, all that kind of stuff, product is substantially more expensive, in a fully licensed market. And the only way to really drive people into that market is to either lower the taxes or, frankly, scare people about what could potentially happen to them by buying unregulated product.
Yeah, I mean, there was a study that came out in Spain, like 2 or 3 years ago, and they had tested the legacy markets product, and 80% contained fecal matter. So it's just the stuff that you buy on the street, it's just a gamble, right? You don't know truly what you're getting. Tell us a little bit. One of the things we've seen, and maybe you can talk about this, is there seems to be a rush by law firms to now be in the cannabis space. It's hot, it's a green rush. You guys are in the space, and I'm not suggesting that this is you, but how do we sort of differentiate from the real legal players in the cannabis space versus the wannabes?
Yeah, I mean, it's, listen, it's, I think it's not unique to cannabis. Anytime there's a new industry that people think there are opportunities, they rush to it from, all aspects, legal, I mean, all professional services. We made a decision as a firm 7 years ago to enter the space. I think the way we differentiate yourselves, and certainly, the corporate lawyers in our cannabis practice. We have we have 120 lawyers in our cannabis practice across all legal disciplines. Is we don't say we're cannabis lawyers, right? We say we are business lawyers who have an industry focus in cannabis, and it's I think it's a subtle but important difference. If you are raising money, if you're starting a business, if you are selling your business, buying a business, you want someone who is deeply steeped in in sort of the M&A transaction world. But it's also very important, particularly in this sector, given the unique regulatory aspects of it being federally legal, that they understand the cannabis cannabis world really well. And so, frankly, that means you have to have, years of experience, within your firm and have a deep bench. And so, without, demeaning any of the, quote, cannabis law firms out there, a number of them, started, their life as criminal defense lawyers, getting their clients, out of jail for cannabis convictions. When it became legal, they were the first ones to be involved in, either helping draft the legislation or deeply understanding it. So, they've been really good on the licensing side, but, they're not experienced M&A lawyers. And, M&A is challenging enough, as a business owner, if you don't have a legal, accounting, and other professional service teams behind you to do it, you're at a real disadvantage. And so, I think it's, looking at the firm, how long they've been in the space, how many lawyers I have in the group who've actually done cannabis work. I mean, everybody is, they say raise your hand if you want to be in our cannabis group, right? It doesn't mean you've done any work. And while I say we have 120 lawyers in our cannabis group, we have probably 20 or 30 folks who are interested but haven't done any work. But on the other hand, we have 60 or 70 lawyers across all legal disciplines who are deeply steeped in the industry. Not all of them are spending half their time or more like our core group, but plenty of them are spending 10, 20, 30% of their time. Employment lawyers, IP lawyers. It's you need to understand these cannabis nuances in order to adequately represent a client.
And is part of your role to advocate for different legislation to move this along?
We don't do a ton of lobbying. I mean, I obviously would speak to any regulator who wanted to speak to me. I've spoken to some folks up in New York, in the Office of Cannabis Management. I mean, there are certain things I would like to see, but I'm not a registered lobbyist, and I wouldn't even know how to start. I mean, it's there are a number of cannabis trade associations whose focus is on legislation. There are some actually cropping up now that are more sort of focused on the business of cannabis. There's a group that started in the West Coast called the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce that's just moved east that I've become part of to it's really to help like any chamber of commerce help business be successful without a legislative agenda. But there are plenty of groups handling all aspects of this industry for anybody who wants to get involved.
And does the activity in the local states like New Jersey help move things in New York?
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you look at the whole tri-state area, and depending on where you sit, it can be New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, even New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts. I think they all feed off each other. There is notwithstanding that it's not truly legal, people are crossing borders all the time to buy product, and that means lost tax revenue for the state, or in the case of New York and New Jersey, which just started adult use sales, at the end of April, the sooner you can stand up your adult use market, the quicker you'll start to generate tax revenue. And so it's always been, obviously New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut all sort of on the same path to standing up adult use. And, New Jersey is, currently in the lead because they started it, although they don't, at the moment, there are no edibles in New Jersey, and it will require amendment to legislation to get there. So I think, once New York, launches, it will, probably substantially overtake the New Jersey market, and all those people in New York won't have to cross, a bridge or a tunnel to buy their product.
And nobody wants to go to New Jersey.
But by the same token, right? It's, I know some of the people who run dispensaries in the Berkshires, and you obviously can tell where the person is from because they're tracking driver's licenses. Half their sales are from New York.
Sure.
Now, a large portion of those may be people with second homes up there, but it's going to be very interesting to see, what happens to these markets surrounding New York when, someone can just, go around the corner or even just have it delivered, and they won't have to go to out of state to do it. So, we're all sort of waiting to see how that all plays out. No one's quite sure, how, it also depends on, who carries what brand.
And where does CBD currently sit in all of this?
Well, I mean, CBD is now, legal. You can ship it, wherever you want. You can buy it wherever you want. You can't make, health claims, and the FDA has been cracking down on folks who make, any health claims about CBD. There is a portion of the industry out there that questions, what CBD is good for and what it isn't good for. I mean, I think, there's certainly some anecdotal evidence that it helps certain things. Whether or not you need CBD in shampoo and toilet paper, it's always a question. But is it snake oil? Probably not. But if you say the product has CBD and you can charge more because everybody thinks it's it's a wonder, I can't say wonder drug, a wonder product, then people are going to charge more and people are going to buy it. The problem with CBD is, there's sort of, there's less differentiation, at the moment. And so it's becoming a bit of a commodity. I mean, I think one of the reasons you see more, one of the reasons you see more money flowing into THC is because, there's, it's a more, it's a controlled substance. And so there's with a lot more upside, and there'll always be, it'll be regulated, so there'll be limited, ability to to grow through sell.
And does New York or do the players within New York, do they intend to create a craft market, or will this be big cannabis? What's going to be the approach to that?
So as the legislation now stands, you can only have a license in a single license category. I think we have 9 or 10 license categories. We have cultivation, manufacturing, processing, extraction, delivery, retail, consumption lounge, and then we have a micro license and a co-op license. And I'm probably missing one or two. But there's a limit on the amount of canopy if you want to cultivate. There's a limit on the number of employees you have in delivery. If you have retail, you only can have 3. So, there's not going to be mass consolidation in the industry. Whether or not some of the MSOs who want a footprint in New York will come in and partner, with somebody to get a toehold, so that once consolidation is allowed, they're positioned to do so. We'll be seen. But I also think most people think, that the odds of, there'll be, I think the belief is there will be a state limit on total canopy. There may not be a state limit on retail. That's, we'll have to see there. But I think everybody believes the best way to ensure you get a license is to partner with a social equity applicant, which means, as a some, as a non-social agri-active, the most you can own is 49%. So, will there be, is there a business model to make major investment when, your revenue will be limited for some period of time until you consolidate?
And then, these limitations, are we primarily talking adult use? What about medicinal, or are they facing the same limitations?
Well, on medicinal, there are 11, I can't remember, 9 or 11. They're called registered organizations, fully vertically integrated. They're not granting any more of those. Okay. So,
so the players are the players.
Players are the players. They may flip. We just saw Etain, sell out a couple of weeks ago for a nice large sum of money. Now, the interesting thing with that is, if you are one of these registered, organizations and are allowed to have, I believe, up to 6, retail locations, you will be able to co-locate 3 adult use in your 6. So, they will have, when that's allowed, sort of a built-in, advantage, because, they'll be able to guarantee, both supply of product and be able to immediately stand up an adult use, location at one of the existing retail locations. So we don't know yet whether or not, when they're going to allow those folks to start selling in theirs, and whether or not they make them wait a bit to let the industry catch up, or they're more interested in getting the market flowing, in which case you turn that spout on easier. I mean, that's what New Jersey just did, was allow 11 of the vertically integrated medical companies to start selling in their in their locations. And they're like $2 million of sales on the first day. Primarily it's flower and pre-rolls, because that's all they really had in stock.
And what has been the challenge that most of the clients are coming to you for? What are they working on?
It depends at what level. I think that capital is always continues to be a challenge. I mean, and 60% of my, or 70% of my cannabis practice is working with established operators who are either moving into other states or trying to expand, and for them it's access to capital. Obviously, in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, even to Massachusetts, it's a lot of them are either are considering applying for a license, or have one, or are looking for capital. And New York in particular, since other than the cultivation license, there's nothing to apply for. The challenge is it's being prepared. We expect when the regs come out, when the regs come out, that, and the portal opens for even the first 200 retail, you're going to have a relatively short window of time to submit your application. And right, if you haven't started talking to people already, there are a lot of resources you need, right? You're going to need a business plan with financial projections. You're going to need security plans, SOPs, right? You're going to need a lawyer who knows what they're doing. You're going to need to start talking to folks with capital, and you're probably going to have to begin to have identified real estate. Now, it's likely that you won't have to have your location locked up when you submit your application, but looking at other states which give you 3 or 4 months, that may not be enough time, right? I mean, and the challenge, one of the biggest challenges for folks, particularly on the retail side, is identifying a location that's not within 200/500 feet of a school, place of worship, with a landlord that's willing to have you as a tenant. And it's not right, and often it's not just the landlord's decision, right? If they have a mortgage, their lender may not allow them to rent to a cannabis tenant. In other words, they could be in default of their mortgage. But then you have the thorny issue of, they're not going to say, sure, as soon as you get your license, the space is available, right? They're going to want you to sign a lease, and you will wind up having to pay rent, for a period of time, not knowing even whether or not you're going to get a license. But if you wait until you have your license, you may find it very difficult to find suitable property. And
Yeah, you
that's
have
been
to
one of,
obviously invest upfront, and then hope and pray you get a license.
right, which is not, which is not going to be, I mean, it's, you're really buying a lottery ticket here, and you just, I mean, we have no idea how many people are going to apply for licenses, but I can probably, with 99% certainty tell you not everybody who applies is going to get one. I mean, there will be, there may likely be, I mean, first of all, a large portion of the state, although, by geography, not necessarily by population, has opted out. Now, New York City is all opted in, and everybody I've spoken to in here thinks, I mean, they want to be in sort of premier locations. How many, can you have within a 10-block radius, or within a borough or whatnot? It'll be interesting to see how all that plays out. But I mean, real estate is going to be one of the largest stumbling blocks, I think, for people who do this, because they won't be able to afford to pay, rent in advance of getting a license, or they're going to wait too long and not be able to find the suitable, location that fits their needs.
And just to sort of shift topic a little bit, I know that you've spent a considerable amount of time networking online, and then recently headed down to Florida. How has the transition back to in-person been?
Exhausting, right? It's, as I say, I'm out of conference shape. I mean, it's, though I was down in Miami, for the Benzinga Capital Conference, that I'm not getting paid to say this. It's one of the best, cannabis conferences I've been to. I think, the fact that they had over 1,600 people in person, which is probably double or triple what they've had in the past, shows how much people want to be in person together. But, it's physically and mentally exhausting, to, be on your feet all day talking to people, probably 16 hours a day. And so, I'm just, I'm out of shape of doing that, and I have to sort of, work my way back into it. But it was really good to be back in person.
Yeah, what was interesting is my networking capabilities is about 3 to 4 hours, and then after that I get too cranky. Like I have to leave. Like it's, I'm going to do more damage at that point than you're.
Yeah.
I know with the Benzinga conference, we're starting to lump in psychedelics. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? For the cannabis industry specifically.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think there's a lot of misconceptions. I will say, and the Benzinga conference actually had, for the first time, a sort of pre-conference on psychedelics that I went down to, because it's something I want to learn more about. I always thought this to be the case, and it was definitely, confirmed being there. They're two completely different industries. The psychedelics, in my view, the psychedelics industry will take a completely different path than cannabis, right? I mean, every single company who was there presenting, who has, a psychedelic-based drug it will go ultimately for FDA approval. Mm-hmm. So it will not face, I do not think, I mean, yes, Oregon, a couple of other places have legalized psilocybin. But I think by and large, this is a biotech, life science, industry. These drugs will all be, approved by the FDA, and so will not face the same issues that cannabis has. I think we're a long way from, having pop-up psilocybin dispensaries and having states legalize it. So I think it does the industry a disservice when people say it's like, cannabis 2.0 or 3.0. I think it'll be, very, very different. I mean, I know as a firm, firm management originally took the position they thought it would take a cannabis path, but with, more, even sort of more issues. I think, we've recently come to the conclusion, that it will be different. And so, we are willing to begin to explore, working with psychedelic companies, provided that, they're going to do an FDA pathway to, if they're on the drug side, or, if they're supporting that, obviously slightly different. But, I think it's a fascinating industry. Everything I've heard about it, there are some significant, health and wellness, serious medical benefits for some of these psychedelics that do a lot more than some of the drugs out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, and like you said though, but they're going to go down an evidence-based trial,
Yes.
approach. So
Yeah.
they'll do the clinical trials. They'll make sure that because if they're going to make the medical claims, like you said, they're going to have to go through the FDA approval process.
And they're all. Everyone I've spoken to about this, I know a fraction of what I know about cannabis. These are all that will be prescribed under a doctor or professional care. We won't see. I know some people microdose mushrooms, but by and large, these are ones that are they're a drug, and will be treated that way, and will be prescribed in some fashion, and you'll take them, and will be you do therapy while you're using it. It's I know Johns Hopkins has done studies with LSD to treat PTSD that have apparently had phenomenal success in keeping it under control for 6 months at a time with one treatment. But you do it in a doctor's office or a therapist's office
in a controlled environment.
Yeah. So I think ultimately it's very different, but I think it's gonna be it'll probably wind up being dominated by big pharma companies, or smaller ones will buy them, and then we'll start them, and then big pharma will buy them, and so I suspect it'll be a bigger industry than the cannabis will be at some point, once they're all out there, and they're discovering new ones every day.
And so my last question for you is on the be careful what you ask for, right? So we've heard that everyone is pushing for legalization at the federal level, but there's folks in the industry that aren't in a big hurry. What do you think? What are the disadvantages of federal legalization?
Well, and I think they're right. If you look at most of the folks in the industry now are perfectly happy with the status quo, other than banking and taxes. Banking and taxes, right? So if you could get the Safe Banking Act passed and do away with 280E, and for those of you who are not familiar with that, it's that section of the tax code that essentially makes anybody in the cannabis business can't deduct any of their expenses other than cost of goods. So you're essentially paying taxes on your gross margin. So it's like you could be losing money and having to pay taxes. The concern about people in the industry is, as soon as it's federally legal, all the players out there who have billions of dollars in cash on their balance sheet, Coke, Pepsi, J&J, big pharma, big bev, big CPG, even like folks like Uber and the like, will come in and completely dominate the market. And so the industry wants to get a little more, a little larger, a little more further developed, and be better acquisition candidates for these folks to come in. So I don't see, there's not a ton of lobbying by any of those folks for federal legalization. I also don't think it's not as if you're immediately going to have interstate commerce. You're going to have every state that has had people spend hundreds, if not billions of dollars building up infrastructure in their states, isn't going to want that to disappear at a moment's notice, because then all of a sudden it's cheaper to grow in California, although you guys will have water problems out there, so who knows what happens there. But or even right, and cannabis may be one of the first to suffer that. But once you open up that can of worms, then what do you do with flour coming in from Colombia and Mexico and places like that? And so states for a period of time will protect their borders in a way that will probably require some court actions, because technically you have to have a reason to protect your borders and your citizens. It can't be protecting tax revenue. So it'll be interesting to see how long that takes to play out. But I also don't see in the current environment any any real action on this for any time soon. There are, as someone put on a webinar, and they had legislative aids for some of the long-term sponsors in the House, with Russia, Ukraine, China, infrastructure. There's so many things that people view as more important, and floor time on the Senate is very limited. And so
yeah, but what people think is important and what drives the Senate doesn't seem to be the same thing, right?
Correct, yes, but I don't think anybody thinks that that cannabis is important enough to drive some of the other things off, the extent that the bill does get to the floor. And then you have to, and then can you get, at least 10 Republican senators to vote in favor of a cannabis bill and B, a Democratic sponsored bill. And then, if the, without getting too politically, involved here, if the Senate flips and or the House flips in November, then you're left with, a lame duck session, and things are really hard to get done then. And then you have, are the Republicans willing to sponsor a cannabis bill in the Senate? And then if that's the case, will Democrats vote for it? I mean, things are so polarized now that getting anybody to agree on anything, and then you have 2024, and depending on who the president is and their view of cannabis, that could either, move it forward or, push it back even more. So, I'm hearing people say now, somewhere between 5 and 10 years is when they expect legalization. But, that's, you're staring into a crystal ball, and, nobody has, frankly, any idea. This is not what you could predict.
But like you said, the industry could use those 5 and 10 years to mature and to protect itself.
Yeah, and those of us in it are, we like that, obviously, as you mentioned before, we are seeing more law firms in it, but there's still a number of our peer group who aren't. And, so, we're not objecting to the fact that we have less competition.
Exactly. Well, Michael, we very much appreciate your time today and your insights. We look forward to hearing from you again. And if people are interested in what you're doing and want more information, where can they find you? You can find me on LinkedIn, under my name that you see here. Feel free to email me as well. It's M as in Michael, D as in David, Schwamm, like my last name, at DuaneMorris.com. Always happy to discuss this subject. Some people say I spend way too much time talking about it, but I think it's a really interesting industry. I'm sort of very passionate about it. Particularly on the social equity side, and making sure that the folks who should get a shot at this industry, get a shot at it. And so, always happy to help and make connections. It is, a fascinating industry and incredibly collaborative. I've never seen an industry where you have competitors actually helping each other, because they all, the rising tide lifts all boats. It has never been more applicable than it is here. Michael, again, we appreciate your time. Please keep talking about it. You've offered some really great insights here and on other platforms into what's going on in New York, and we appreciate that. So we look forward to chatting with you again, and thank you again.
Oh, thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.